Welcome to Not Another PD, the podcast for helping professionals who are over dull trainings and death by slideshow workshops. I'm Jasmine Purcell, social worker, coach, supervisor, and self-proclaimed boundaries queen. Each week, you'll hear real, honest conversations, sometimes solo, sometimes with expert guests. Think insider perspectives, practical takeaways, and a focus on your well-being, not just how you show up for clients. This podcast is about you, the human behind the caseload, the human behind the profession. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Episode 18. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about something that, quite frankly, I don't think we talk about enough, which is people pleasing and the fawn response as helping professionals. Before we go into the topic, I really want to normalize people pleasing and how common it is for us as helping professionals. This episode isn't about naming and shaming particular people that say, oh yes, I notice so-and-so's a people pleaser in the workplace, or that I'm a people pleaser in the workplace. It's not about naming and shaming. It's really just about us understanding how people pleasing can show up in our professional lives. It's often a protection for us if we're feeling particularly uncomfortable with a certain situation in our workplace or even in our personal life, then sometimes that people-pleasing default response is a self-protection response. So it's important to acknowledge the context of the people-pleasing. We do this largely for self-protection. So our body is trying to keep us safe. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the fawn response because it's not something that we talk about very much. As helping professionals working in this field, you would have heard of the fight, flight, or freeze response. But there's another component of it called the fawn response, more of the people pleasing, the trying to appease people. And the fawn response, similarly to the fight, flight, or freeze response, is not something that we're consciously aware of. It's not something that we do, that we're aware that we're doing, and we don't find ourselves in a difficult situation in the workplace and then consciously say to ourselves, oh, I'm going to use the fawn response. I'm going to be a people pleaser. I'm going to try and appease my difficult team manager or my difficult client just to try and people please so I can sort of keep the peace. It's not something that we're consciously aware of, which is another reason why I felt so compelled to record this episode and talk about this topic to you all. It's an automatic response. Some examples of the fawn response and how it may look like for you. Some examples of the fawn response would be to actually not put clear boundaries in place. And I speak so much about boundaries, but one of the things that I see so often, and I speak to helping professionals all the time about this, is that they tend to say yes before thinking about whether their caseload permits them to take on yet another referral or yet another task. Or if you have a shortage of staff, then you all of a sudden get asked to take carriage of someone else's workload. So you're doing the work of 3 people, 3 clinicians instead of 1. This can look like agreeing, saying yes to being agreeable to all these extra tasks without actually thinking about, is this practical? Do I actually have enough mental capacity or even hours in the workday to take on yet another client referral or additional tasks and responsibilities? Another one is we could engage in avoidance behaviour, so avoiding having difficult or even just assertive conversations. I'll give an example how this is shown up for me, and this could resonate with you. Hopefully it does. Or if you follow me on Instagram, so I'll keep it as brief as possible for anyone who's already heard the story. For those of you who don't know, I'm a mum of 2, and one of the boundaries that I am really clear on is that my family's my priority. And I had a particularly difficult interaction with a manager, let's put it that way. And I needed to leave work on time to pick up my daughter from childcare before they close. That was one of my boundaries. The traffic just seemed to be just increasing every day. And I remember going to work and my team manager at the time wasn't happy that I'd left work at 5 o'clock, which was my finishing time. And my team manager actually said to me, "You cannot leave unless I dismiss you." If we think about then someone saying that to you, that would invoke quite an automatic response, and everyone's response is very different. Someone, if they were using the flight response, could have just kind of, again, avoided the situation, but then sort of try to avoid the team manager, perhaps even leaving the workplace in that moment, going for a walk, really just trying to flee the situation. For myself, I did neither of these things. I demonstrated the fawn response, in which I went into people-pleasing mode. So after having that unpleasant interaction with my team manager, I tried to work even harder to please her. I always took great pride in my work, but I was going above and beyond to actually try to please her, to prove that I am a good worker. And despite the fact that I needed to leave at 5 o'clock because I had a child to pick up, I really sort of fawned, and I really tried to impress her because I didn't want her to think badly of me. If I could turn back time, I certainly would respond a lot differently now. I certainly would be a lot more assertive, politely and professionally assertive. I guess hindsight is so so powerful. However, I certainly have come a long way since that time. The fawn response is something that often becomes our default as helping professionals. And there's quite a few reasons why we're more vulnerable to the fawn response being in the helping field that we are. If we think about the gendered nature of the profession, I did look up some statistics on social work, and at least in Australia, I don't know the exact stats, but it was something along the lines of 70 to 80% of social workers in Australia identify as being female. So there's that gendered expectation of people who are socialised as female from children. And I know from my own experience as someone who identifies as female, I very much grew up in the era of wearing pink and purple and playing with Barbies and being given Barbies and all the accessories. I'm just talking about from my experience being raised as a female. There was those gendered expectations of how I would act as a female, what sort of activities I would partake in. I very much grew up understanding that my sister and I needed to be quiet, just keep yourselves occupied, don't take up too much space, don't overexert yourself, just be. And I definitely saw that in my upbringing, but I've also spoken to a lot of other helping professionals who were also raised as females and socialized as females, that they saw similar gendered expectations. And when you have that expectation of that, you are consciously aware that you shouldn't be taking up too much space, that's when the people pleasing really starts to show up. So there's that gendered lens. There's also the part of it is that many of us helping professionals also have a lived experience of experiencing some kind of adversity. I myself definitely have a lived experience of childhood adversity, so I know I'm not alone in that. That can make us more vulnerable to the fawn response. Another one is the systemic issues or systemic pressures, so high workloads, high staff turnover in a lot of roles. I know I've previously worked in child protection, and I know that child protection notoriously seem to be understaffed, have high turnover, high burnout rates and things like that. Workplaces really rely on you saying yes. It makes it easier for them if they have staff that are just compliant, that are people pleasing. So the fawn response or at least on the surface, seems to benefit employers and the system. However, it doesn't really, but I won't go into all of that in this episode. Thinking back to the fawn response, and the fawn response is activated when we feel unsafe or really uncomfortable, as I did when my former team manager said to me that you cannot leave until I dismiss you. And as I mentioned, it's the fawn response is a way that our body is trying to keep us safe from any sort of perceived risk or perceived harm. So if we feel unsafe, so it could be that in my case that I actually felt really intimidated by my team manager at the time. I felt that their approach was incredibly intimidating, so that made me feel a bit unsafe, and I defaulted to the people pleasing. There was a study in 2024, and I'll link to that in the show notes, by Christine Sinsky and colleagues in the Journal of Healthcare Management. They actually were looking at leaders, and they found that when leaders improved their communication skills and actually built trust and managed conflict more effectively within their team environments, then rates of staff burnout actually significantly decreased, and staff were actually feeling more fulfilled in their professional roles. This relates to the people pleasing because when we have managers, and as I did, who make us feel unsafe, who are unsupportive, or maybe they're unpredictable in their responses, so maybe when they come into the workplace in the morning, you don't know what personality you'll get. You don't know if they'll be happy-go-lucky and up for a chat and offering to take the team out for coffee instead of the team meeting taking place in a stuffy meeting room, or whether they'll arrive at the office really grumpy and immediately micromanaging everybody because they've had a bad run into work, for example. So if we, as helping professionals, if we have leaders that make us feel unsafe, and I've heard it so often, that's when the fawn response can be activated. So if you're listening and you're a people leader, then this is also super relevant for you, because if for those of us who are leaders, if we're able to communicate effectively and clearly with our team, build that trusting relationship with them, and managing any, conflict or any disagreements within the team, effectively, then we're creating a safer environment for our staff, and then staff would be less inclined to default to the fawn people-pleasing response. So if anyone who wants to read that further, I will link it in the show notes. And I do like to always have a bit of practical tips for you in the episodes. I wanted to talk a bit about how to recognize your fawn response. So there's 3 parts of it. This is, all CBT, and I know you'd all be across it, but we can use CBT to actually look at the 3 parts of the fawn response and how it feels for us. The 3 parts is body, thought, and behaviour. So notice any cues in your body if you think the fawn response is being activated. And body cues could be different for everybody. It could be something as subtle as you're shrinking in posture. Perhaps if you're feeling unsafe because a client is becoming quite aggressive towards you, and you might notice that you might start to sink back in your chair. That could be a body cue. Another one could be a tightness in your chest. You're actually feeling like you're maybe having difficulty breathing. This is not by any means an exhaustive list, but you'll be able to reflect yourself some of the thoughts you might be having if the fawn response is activated for you. Could be that I don't want to upset the person, your client, the colleague, the team manager. I'll just do it myself. I don't want to cause a fuss, or I don't want to be difficult. I know I can resonate with all of those thoughts. And some of the behaviours, so what you could be doing if you're in the fawn response, could be to quickly be agreeing to everything. So you're super agreeable. You're perhaps over-explaining yourself. If on the odd chance that you do decline a request, then you'll over explain why you're not able to do it. So you're just going above and beyond, and it's unnecessary to be explaining to that level of detail unless you're in the fawn response and you're engaging in people-pleasing tendencies. Unnecessary apologies is another one. So not only are you perhaps over explaining that why you can't attend a meeting, but you could be apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry. Normally I would come, but I can't. I'm so sorry. And that almost sounds like begging, right? Begging someone for forgiveness because you can't attend a meeting. And let's acknowledge that we do these things because we do them. I still sometimes do, but let's acknowledge that we do them, and then we can try to interrupt the fawn response. So this is something you can do regularly. You can engage in some of those self-reflections. You can also get an accountability buddy, so a colleague in the workplace, or if you've got a friend that could work in any industry. If you're listening and you think, oh, my friend who's in marketing, I'm sure she'll resonate, you can also share the episode with them, and you can have an accountability buddy to name the fawn response and what it looks like for you. So this reflection does really help. It's also a topic you can bring up in your clinical supervision. Also just naming the response, like in your head, just say, oh, I think I'm defaulting to people-pleasing jazz, and just kind of naming it. It's like name it to tame it. So what we've spoken about in this episode is that the fawn response is something that we engage in to protect ourselves if we're feeling unsafe, uncomfortable, maybe outside of our comfort zone in a work situation, or could be in our personal life. It's really just an open conversation that you can apply to your personal life or your professional life. So it's quite flexible in that way. I used a specific example from my workplace in which I was absolutely in the fawn response and defaulted to people pleasing. So that is definitely something that I've historically done, but I have to keep reminding myself if I think I'm in the fawn response. Before I close this episode, I really want to thank you for supporting the podcast. And I would absolutely love it if you would send me a DM, let me know if this resonates with you. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to Not Another PD. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague who could use stronger boundaries, less burnout, and more balance. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep saying yes less.